Welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. We are still on our victory high as the Stars take a 3-1 lead over Winnipeg. And of course, we have another Spits and Suds episode for you as we get ready for game number 5, which happens Thursday night in Winnipeg. And of course, we'll be with you after the game. And joining us to talk about last night's game and talk about this series overall, he's doing so well for himself. He's an absolute beast. It's a Spits and Suds favorite. His Substack is called Stars Stack, which I would highly recommend. Terrific on the analytics. You can also catch him and Robert Tiffin with D Magazine. They're writing recaps after every game. It's the greatness of David Castillo. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing better now that I'm talking to you because it's been way too long. I missed you, brother. I missed you so much.
Oh, man. I was watching the game last night, and I was like, I want to ask David about this. I want to ask David about this. So,
well, yeah, man, it's also just kind of, my goodness, like when was the last time Dallas, and again, not to, jinx them or anything like that, because, they got to, play Winnipeg at home. It's going to be a tough game. But I mean, when was the last time, we enjoyed a Dallas playoff series that didn't go to at least 6 games? I think Vegas, right?
yes.
Vegas during the Cup run.
Yes. During COVID, right?
Yeah, I don't know why I
yeah.
said during the Cup run. I mean,
Yeah.
they've had.
Yeah, you're right. I
Well,
think
yeah,
you're,
yeah,
I
Cup
think you're
run,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a 4-1. Yeah, so I'm just trying to enjoy I'm trying to hope for and do a rain dance for a series closeout, and not have to just just deal with the anxiety and stress of potentially being forced to game 6, maybe a game 7. That'll be tough for Winnipeg given Hellebuck's road woes, but
Yeah.
whatever. I'm
Well,
just yeah, so it's all good.
it was so interesting because I'm watching the game and I'm like, sometimes like you want to be strong in your convictions, but at the same time you start to question, like, am I the only one that feels as though Dallas is getting outplayed for the most part through 2 periods? And they took advantage of their opportunities. I thought they were terrific in the third. They came out, they were aggressive. They didn't go into a shell. I thought Dallas in the third, I don't know if something was said in the room, but they were a different team in the third. But then I watched the Winnipeg post game, and while they were down, they certainly were like, we thought we did everything we should do. We put a lot of, we took a lot of shots. We thought we overall played well, and they got Oettingered, so to speak.
Well, I think that's a great point. I think it's also something that I'm glad you bring up, with the Winnipeg side, because I think it's something that Dallas, for one, like that was the first time that Winnipeg actually won the, share of shot quality and even strength, right? They had the first time they had the edge in expected goals. And yes, like Winnipeg definitely played a better game, but it wasn't representative. It wasn't a reflection of who they've been throughout the series, which kind of took me by surprise because I really, given how Dallas was kind of punished in terms of possession against Colorado, thought, well, perhaps, Winnipeg is going to be a step up because, they have a little bit, better depth, better like team game. And that just hasn't happened. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But I think the biggest one, and we can either save it for later or just kind of talk about it, briefly, which is special teams.
Yes.
I mean, Dallas, they outscored Colorado 6-3 on the power play. And now they're outscoring Winnipeg 4-1. So, I mean, it's when the margins for error in the playoffs are so thin and, every little edge makes a difference and you have a significant edge on special teams,
Yep.
which is 20% of any given game. That's just a recipe. I mean, it means that Dallas doesn't have to play perfect or even a good game at even strength if they can score on the power play and shut down the other team's power play.
Well, let's build on that because I wanted to talk both when the Stars are shorthanded and when they're on the power play. Do you look at this power play success as Mikko Rantanen becoming a part of that power play? What are you seeing? I am personally seeing teams having to account for Rantanen on the ice. Therefore, that bumper, that middle seems a lot more open than it once was. And I also see a concerted effort for Dallas to get to the net as much as possible and try to work that middle rather than shoot from the outside.
No, I think that's a great observation. That's exactly what's happening, right? I mean, like you've seen a lot of shots, from Dallas in the slot precisely because, teams are kind of overcommitting trying to cover Rantanen on the flank. And of course they have to, right? You have to respect Rantanen's shot, but of course he's such an adept playmaker that, well, he can burn you in multiple ways. And so the power play is just kind of, it hasn't always been perfect.
Yeah.
I think there are some times where I feel like the shifts in general like aren't that notable. Even the first goal, right, by Mikael Granlund, right? That's not a shot that Hellebuyck should let in, right? So I don't necessarily credit the power play, but of course, you credit the individual performances. So I think Dallas has really got this kind of nice mixture of, Steve Spott, Pete DeBoer kind of making adjustments on the power play. The addition of Rantanen is obviously massive, but also just, kind of players doing a really great job in terms of like systems and tactics. We saw that in game 7 against Colorado, where, the normal 1-3-1 formation, gives way to, excuse me, gives way to two up top. Duchene up there with the point man drifts into the middle. That totally screws up Colorado's coverage, and that allows Duchene to get to the goal line for a cross ice pass to Wyatt Johnston, which ended up being the game winner. So I think there are just a lot of moving parts that are just, paying huge dividends for Dallas.
I'm really happy for Granlund. I just think he does so many little things so well, and he's just kind of a guy that it's great to have on the team. He can kill penalties. But he can obviously.
So wait a minute. Did you? Okay, so like, I'm probably calling myself out here, but did you like that trade at the time?
Yes.
Portion of assets given up?
No.
Okay,
no.
all right.
I mean, I had mixed emotions about it. I felt as though, and I think it's a great conversation, David. I'm not a fan of giving up a first-round pick and a conditional third, which could be a fourth. We hope it's a third because that means the Stars went to the Stanley Cup. That's a lot, but I felt as though with the Sagan and Heiskanen injury, those pieces were needed.
See, and that's, so we're both crow eaters, right? I mean, we're excuse me, we're both eating crow, which I was right there with you. In fact, I wouldn't even say that. I was actually like kind of actively like, oh God, what? Granlund, like this is not a needle move. I guess because it felt like a panic move, right? It felt like, oh, Sagan is injured. And I feel like there was a reason for that, right? So Sagan's injury, in addition to Dallas was kind of struggling to score. However, I always felt like, well, it was really just the power play that was struggling to score. So I didn't feel like Granlund was necessarily a need. Still, certainly didn't like Ceci being attached. But man, like, Granlund, it was hard to envision Granlund in the position he's in now,
Sure.
where being on that top line with Hintz and Rantanen has been just such a boon to like his game in terms of, being tasked with kind of being a responsible two-way player that, plays on both sides of special teams. And also I think kind of replicating, what Rantanen had in Colorado, where sure, like McKinnon, Hintz and Granlund are not McKinnon, but in the aggregate, two guys that are fast countrymen, and can shoot as well as pass, I think has done a really good job of kind of, recreating something similar. And that's been huge, not just for Granlund, but for the other two players as well.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating because you don't realize it, but Granlund had 66 points this year in the regular season. 45 45 with San Jose, 21 with the Stars.
Well, I mean, that's the thing though, right? He had a lot of points playing like, a sort of prime position and prime minutes. And so it was hard for me to see at the time how that would mesh with Dallas and, who could only give him right Sagan's spot. And then for a time, next to Johnston and Benn. And so, man, I've been really happy to kind of just be wrong on that. Because we're just seeing like how good he is when he is, when he's given room to kind of be that player that doesn't, isn't tasked with, being the scorer on a line or the passer on a line, but somebody that just, helps fuel the other two, right? That kind of perfect
Right.
complementary piece. And so
Now
it's been fun.
we didn't know Ceci, but I will say, because if you don't talk about it, then no one will know that you were mentioning. But our Spits and Suds listeners do realize that prior to that, when trade talks would come up, we did mention Granlund a lot based on a few factors: the year he was having, the expiring contract, the fact that Jim Nill was pretty vocal as far as, I don't want to sign anyone who has years remaining due to the cap constraints that we have. That's prior to the whole Rantanen thing happening. So because of that, when you looked at the free agents, Granlund certainly was a name that you had to mention. But you also mentioned Cody Ceci, and his name hasn't been mentioned much. Third on time on ice for defensemen last night. The fact that we're not mentioning them, I'm guessing that's a good thing, right, David?
I wouldn't. I know that. Listen, like I don't. I think one of the things, and this is true, I think for people in general, and true of me as well, which is that for those of us that kind of traffic in sort of the macro level patterns and the quote unquote fancy stats and the analytics, it's easy to sort of confuse value added for value indefinitely, right? So CC is never rated as a strong shift to shift defenseman. And to me, he really isn't either. I mean, like Dallas is still getting massively outshot in Lindell and CC's minutes. So I think at a certain point you kind of wonder, well, is that sustainable if we're, say, looking forward to an Edmonton series? And like I said, again, this is not to this is not to kind of die on the hill that, oh, well, CC's terrible. No, but I do think it's possible for players that, while they may not rate out as quality defensemen or quality players from shift to shift, can still give you good games. And so I think that's kind of part of what we're seeing with Cody Ceci, which is that he is, I would still, to me, he's not a top four defenseman, or he's not a defenseman that adds value in the top four. However, he has managed to kind of give Dallas, good shifts here and there. And I still wonder, even though Cece's never going to get bumped down to the fourth line, I do wonder if Heiskanen is fully gets 100%, right? And they go with six defensemen. Is there a discussion of, hey, maybe Lindell with Heiskanen, Harley with Lyubushkin, perhaps, and Ceci on the third pair? Is there a discussion where, and it's not because you're bumping Ceci down, but perhaps in an effort to give Bixell, I think, who has played fantastic,
yes,
more minutes, maybe this is kind of just something you do with your defense pairs where it's just kind of evenly divided, right? There's not a single pair that you have to worry about having to shelter. And so I think that's, perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves, another discussion, but oh man, you forced me to talk about Cody Ceci and my brain breaks. I'm sorry.
I absolutely love making your brain break because that brain is awesome. I was wondering if they were going to take Lyubushkin and move him down, but I do appreciate the 11-7, and kudos to Sean Shapiro. He was chirping about it early, and I'm interested to see what they'll go with next game. Because I think Winnipeg's going to come out real physical. I think they're going to really try to take it to the Stars' defense.
Yeah, no, that's something that I would expect to. I would expect the 11-7 to remain the same because, I mean, you saw what they did right this game, right? Which is, well, their quote unquote fourth line was basically just floaters with Robertson and Johnston, getting double shifted with Rantanen, right? So, I mean,
yeah,
there's kind of no reason at this point for Dallas to really kind of change things up because they've been so broadly successful. But so I would expect the same thing. I wouldn't expect Dallas to go down to six defensemen probably until the next series. I mean, as long as Heiskanen is not 100%, and I don't think he looked 100% either. I mean, he's clearly a guy, like if this had been the regular season, like he's not playing.
Right. Yeah, and he looked gassed at times, which is totally understandable. You can't replicate playoff hockey, specifically being out that long. You just can't. No matter how many times you want to go back and forth, playoff hockey's a little bit different. So I fully expect him to get better, just like I think Robertson's playing better and better. And I did like how Robertson was kind of getting close to Hellebuck last night. I think that's a great sign when he's doing that. So it's going to be pretty fascinating. So when I tweeted out about the Benn penalty last night, caught some flack from Stars fans saying, well, he's sticking up for his teammates. I just don't think at that point in the game it's worth taking that penalty for it, even though Winnipeg has been shut down. They did during the regular season have one of the top power play units in the National Hockey League. So I just thought it was a bad penalty at that time to come in after the whistle. And, I think it was they pushed Scheifele down.
Well, I mean, in this case, sorry, fans, but the fans are just wrong. Like, you're right here. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast. Like, I mean, I think it would be one thing. For one, like, I think Winnipeg screwed up by, excuse me, I think Winnipeg screwed up by not pulling the goalie right in that situation.
Yeah.
I think if they had, there's probably a good chance that, Winnipeg, possibly breaks through. But I mean, more to the point, like, it would be one thing if that was Benn's kind of like only bad penalty.
Yeah.
No, he's been taking a lot of bad penalties, right? So this is just kind of on par with his on ice behavior. And listen, I don't want to like sit here and kind of like, slag on like Benn or anything like that, because I think for the player that he is at this point in his career, like an Asian power forward, I think what he's doing or what he's been doing is pretty admirable and pretty impressive, right? I mean, this is a guy that,
Absolutely.
2 years ago, right? The Athletic had an article about, how regression was due for Benn, and he was gonna go back to being a 30, 40 point player, and that didn't happen. Granted, a lot of this is the Wyatt Johnston effect, but I do think that Benn is he's kind of, I think, in an effort to kind of make himself kind of be present and have his presence felt, he's just trying to do too much, and that often means bad passes. It means, quote unquote, being engaged slash physical, which usually for him means crossing the line. And you just can't have that. I mean, even if no matter how good Dallas's penalty kill is playing, well, what if like, that leads to a penalty, crucial penalty killer blocking a shot, injures them. Because why? Because Benn, like lost his cool because he couldn't control his emotions. I mean, to me, like Benn just really needs to go back to just playing a simple north-south game, without the fancy, button hook passes, and just, this team is like leading is quietly, you know, um, dominating. And
Yeah.
so that's all they need from Ben, just like quiet dominance. You don't have to prove that you're a savage all the time,
Yeah.
So
I
so
just think
yeah,
great that they're killing penalties like they are. Kudos to the penalty killing units. But David, I think you and I agree. Let's say they do play Edmonton in the next round if they advance, even Winnipeg now. You just can't give them those power play momentum minutes.
well, I mean, exactly. It's that, and also it's also just about habits, right? I mean, if you are taking these like ill-timed penalties, whether early in the game or late in the game, why should that change going into next series
Right.
unless you kind of change your behavior? So, um, so yeah, it's obviously we don't need to get ahead of ourselves. Dallas is still in this, locked in this series with Winnipeg, but there's just no reason to play with fire, and there's no reason to tax a penalty kill that has been fantastic. Like, this is actually something I'm going to be writing about this week, doing some kind of film room analysis about how Dallas's penalty kill, first they shut down Colorado, and now they're shutting down Winnipeg, and that's just a really interesting story on its own that I think not enough is said in relation to the job like Elaine Nasruddin and the penalty killers are doing.
Yeah. 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 I agree. And that's without Blackwell in the lineup as well.
Well, like, how serious are you? Because I mean, it's
Well, those that listen to the podcast know I'm a Blackwell and Granlund kind of guy. So take
oh man.
that.
Look, hey, Blackwell has, he's been fantastic, dude. I
He has.
really,
I like his
um,
aggression on the penalty kill.
no, absolutely. Like that, and that's one of the things that that I'll actually be highlighting, which is like players like Blackwell and Steele
Yeah.
have been so good in forcing shots, forcing like essentially the power play or the opposing power play to really kind of scramble along the walls, right? So it's disrupting, teams getting into formation, and it's just been really great grunt work. One of the reasons why I was with you, I felt like Blackwell never should have been scratched. I think they have kind of the ideal forward lineup. Although I will say I do miss Maverick Bork.
I know. I know. Boy, he's long forgotten, isn't he? But I
He
mean,
won't be next year,
no, no. And that's so
not
interesting.
with the cap situation.
Man, and it sounds wrong because I want to see them hoisting the cup, but I am so ready to talk. Like, for instance, how can you not have Petravic in your top 7 next year?
I mean, it's I mean that's the thing. Like, why didn't they do that
I
last
know
year,
that's
right?
what I
Like,
don't
why?
understand. I have sat down and I have thought sports wise of another comparison. I even went beyond the scope of hockey, of a player that has spent 2 years in the minors, but when the stage is biggest, he comes up and performs well. Granted, he is protected, just like they protected Lundqvist, just like they protected Hanley. His minutes are basically the same as Bischel. However, I just find it a fascinating story. And I'm like, okay, why can't this guy, even if he's a healthy scratch, be part of this team during the season?
Well, and the crazy thing is, it's not the first time.
I
It's Joel
know, I know.
Hanley.
It's amazing. It really
Um,
is. I mean, there have been so many things to talk about in this series. But to me, the story of Alexander Petrovic is tremendous as far as what he's been able to do and the seamless transition from the AHL to the NHL, and as if he was been on the team all year.
well, I think it's a great example of what happens when teams are that so afraid of losing minutes, right? Like I'm trying to think of like a good example for Dallas, but I mean, you can just look at Winnipeg as a great example, right? They were so afraid of losing veteran minutes on the third pair that they gave up a second and fourth round pick for Luke Shin,
Yeah.
who was a healthy scratch last game.
Yep.
You don't need these players, like especially, this is like this is what informs the whole concept behind replacement level and analytics, which is that, just because you lose a veteran player does not mean someone cannot step in their place and give you those minutes, right? Because it's not about the minutes, it's about the value added within those minutes. So that was the issue, right? Which is that, well, Petrovic could give you the same value added as Brennan Smith or Matt Dumba. To a lesser extent, we can even say Lyubushkin, even though I do think Lyubushkin is like pretty solid. But I mean, if Lundqvist was healthy, right? I mean, is anybody really having an issue with, Lyubushkin being scratched, with kind of, Heiskanen, Ceci, and maybe Lundqvist, be in the top three, or perhaps Petrovic in place of Lundqvist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. That's really like the job that, ideally your pro scout should be able to identify, which is, well, do we really need an expensive, overcosted player for this depth position, or does the depth we have in the AHL, can they be that replacement level defender in that spot
Mm-hmm.
where you're not having to spend anything and you get the exact same value?
Yeah. I'm interested from the Winnipeg side of Logan Stanley, a big defenseman, 63 games during the regular season, playoff start. All of a sudden, it's like, we're good. It's like,
No,
whoa.
no, no. Please tell me you are not a Logan Stanley truther.
I mean, I gave you Kesselring, right?
Oh, okay, all right. Listen, the Kessel ring, I will concede. But listen, I like Kessel ring as well. In fact, I still hope Dallas can find a way to. I mean, he's cheap. Give up, more picks to get him. I'm all for it. But
I personally feel as though big defensemen give Dallas issues. But maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like a good counterexample, but I mean, Logan Stanley is not it. I mean, there's probably a good chance that you're going to see him and he's going to like lay a big hit and everything like that. But you ask any Jets fan how they feel about Logan Stanley, And that's the thing about Logan Stanley, right? Which is that players like Stanley, other like teams tend to think Logan Stanley is Liam Bichsel, and that's not the case, right?
Mhm.
The reason why Liam Bichsel is so effective is not just because he's physical and he starts crap, get the scrum counter always goes up when he's on the ice, but because he's talented, because he can move the puck. He has good agility for his size. Logan Stanley doesn't have any of that. Logan Stanley is an awful puck handler, and awful edge work. And Jets fans will go to their grave arguing that he should never, ever be on the Jets roster. So if we see him and he has a good game, listen, I'll be on the podcast and you could tell me I told you so. But
I
if we
understand.
see him and Dallas scores 3 goals with him on the ice
Yeah,
because he can't get the puck out of the
then you
zone,
can give it to
you
me.
better have me on.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I will. Hey, we'd be remiss if I didn't hear from you regarding Jake Oettinger and what he was able to do, not just last night, but I think he's been terrific in these playoffs.
Oh man, it's so good. And it's not like, it's not just about, Oettinger versus Hellebuck. I think it's safe to say that like Hellebuck, really just has maybe kind of like Kerry Lettinen, he has these just kind of clutch demons that he has to deal with. And maybe there's some truth to that. For like Oettinger, to me, like the big thing is just how good he is at not not allowing rebounds. I think has been a big thing. And also, it's worth remembering. We don't talk about this enough when it comes to the development of players. Especially for goaltenders where their aging curves are very different than for skaters, which is that, this is a guy that's getting better. And I think we've always kind of had questions about, whether or not whether or not he's a true number one, whether or not he's that kind of Vezina type caliber goaltender. But no matter what that discussion is, like it doesn't really matter, right? The point is, Oettinger is getting better, and he's getting better at a critical time,
Hmm.
and so that's really like all you can ask from him. And he's just, yeah, he's been so good all playoffs, and
Right.
especially on the penalty kill.
Yeah. Happy birthday, 22 years old, to Wyatt Johnston today. How do you think he's played?
So, man, I'm so glad you asked about Johnston because I feel like nobody's talking about him,
Yeah.
and I think nobody's talking about him because maybe they're afraid to. It's like, well, haven't really like noticed him. I think the thing with Johnston is that he has been, at least up until this point, been given the tough task of having to shut down the top lines, right? He was in the home games against Colorado. It was Johnston versus the McKinnon line. Against Winnipeg, the forward that Johnson has seen the most, or the forwards, I should say, that Johnson has seen the most is Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele. So his role as a 22-year-old is shutting down the opposition. Is the opposition scoring? No, not really. So I don't only credit Johnson for that, obviously. There are a lot of other factors. And of course, I think goaltending is also like a big piece of the equation. But I think Johnson has really done well with a role that's very new to him, right? I mean, like this is not, even though Johnson has played, tough shifts and had to play versus elite competition, um, it's relatively new that he's been essentially kind of played a shutdown role. And so I don't really have anything negative to say about him in terms of what he's done in relation or in proportion to, the quality of competition that he's having to face. And of course, for long stretches of this postseason, he's been playing with Ben and, at certain points, at least until Robertson came back in, to Donoff. And like those are players that don't do anything for his game. Like I'm not saying they're bad, right? Like Jamie Benn, he has some strengths. Dodonov, he has some strengths, and we're kind of like Dodonov truthers here. But it really is Johnston kind of on an island when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And so I think if you saw Johnston, have a much, if you saw him against easier matchups, we would notice him a little bit more. And I
Hmm.
think the fact that we don't is actually a testament to how good he is given his role right now.
And Matt Duchene.
Why do we have to go like this pendulum
I,
swings like from like super high to
Well, it's fascinating because I have him as one of my highest priorities to sign in the offseason. And I'm a big Matt Duchene, love what he's been able to bring since he's been in Dallas. Um, it just seems as though when the playoffs come, it's just not there like the regular season. And I'm not trying to be critical because, like I said, I think he was one of their best players during the regular season.
Well, I think the thing with Duchene, and I think this is something that like hasn't really been, studied to my knowledge, which is kind of like that shift, right, in player performance from regular season to postseason. How do things change when there's just less space and, there's no such thing as a lack of quality of competition. And so I think the thing with Duchene, and I think it's true of Sagan and Marchman as well, which is that these are not good defensive forwards. And that's not really like a criticism. I mean, they have a skill set that they tend to leverage more than their weaknesses, right? It's a strength they leverage more than their weakness. But they are not good defensive forwards. And I think what we're seeing is that we're seeing a line that, yes, they were good in the regular season, but you can score a lot of points when your competition is, like a freaking San Jose or a Buffalo. And you kind of maybe like inflate some of your point totals that way. However, in the playoffs, you can't be caught down low in the defensive zone like they have. A lot of times you're just seeing them get trapped behind the play because, well, they're overselling on that forecheck. And sure, it can pay dividends offensively, but hockey's a three-zone game. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing. And I don't really see like a silver lining here. Like, I mean, I do think they're talented enough that they can score goals. I mean, they still have a positive expected goal share throughout this postseason, but for the most part, they're getting outpossessed. And so I don't know that there's really a whole lot of like positive to say there, other than that, hopefully they get lucky. Hopefully they just get a few bounces their way at a critical juncture.
Any changes you'd like to see, and what do you expect from Winnipeg coming out of the gate?
I mean, so we saw some changes with Winnipeg's forward lines.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of moving like Iafallo, back to the top. And I don't really think I don't really expect Winnipeg. I think you'll probably see Logan Stanley and Luke Shen on the bottom pair. Even though I think Hayden Fleury and Colin Miller have been honestly better. But I mean, I think in an effort to be more physical and play that kind of rough and tumble game like they dealt with, versus St. Louis, I think that's what you're going to see. And then you'll probably see kind of more of Winnipeg's bottom six forwards in the top six. Because obviously what's working for Scheifele and Connor has like not helped. Velarde has been a player that I think is excellent. And he's been kind of moderately productive, but hasn't really, had, very many moments beyond just like the odd points. And of course the power play goals. So I would definitely expect Winnipeg to try to muck the game up, play more physical, and sort of try to win the way they kind of won that St. Louis series.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with your analysis. Final thing, am I overrating Josh Morrissey? I think he's absolutely terrific.
No, I mean this is a player that, top 10 uh
Okay, he is top 10 in the NHL, right?
yeah, but I mean I was gonna say like, top 10, top 8 in some of the fancy stats like net rating and game score and
I like
wins
this.
above
Yeah,
replacement.
tell me. Come on. Let me get that Castillo analytic action. I love it.
By the way, the top performing defenseman per Evolve in Hockey's expected WAR model was Thomas Harley. He was actually above Makar, Hughes, and Werenski.
Wow.
I just want to plug that again because I've mentioned that stat before. But no, man, I think Morrissey's he's kind of like I think he's closer to Harley than Heiskanen. I think
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Sandberg is closer to Heiskanen than Harley. But yeah, I mean, he's such a fantastic defenseman, and it's kind of unfortunate that like they don't really they don't really have good. I mean, I think Neil Pionk has had some really fantastic moments, and I think Dylan DeMello is serviceable. But man, what those two guys would look like if they had proper top four defense partners,
Yeah.
is probably the kind of thing that Winnipeg would sort of love to change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. All right, so tell me what you have coming up as far as what you have on Star Stack, what you're doing with Robert Tiffin, doing podcast, e-magazine. Let's plug David Castillo because so many of our listeners like following you.
Do they?
Yeah, sure do, man. Like you got to just take it in, man. Like you're good at what you do.
Well, I appreciate it. Not as good as what you do, because you are awesome and you're always helping us, and it never goes unappreciated. And so with that, what you call it, the D Magazine, Robert and I will be doing recaps, after every game, of course. So that'll include tomorrow evening, and then for me, I'll be doing some film room analysis on how Dallas's penalty kill has beaten the league's top power play unit in Winnipeg. And then in addition to post-game recaps at the Star Stack as well.
Absolutely, Star Stack, and we can't wait to have you on again sooner rather than later. Thank you for making the time, Mr. Castillo. I just absolutely love that we can talk playoff hockey and the way the Stars are playing, and so fascinating, these series. And wanted to point one thing. I was on in Winnipeg yesterday, and one of the things I was pointing out was old school playoff format. Yeah, you would face Edmonton in the first round, and who knows what would have happened. However, I do find it fascinating that Winnipeg has had to go through a very tough, arguably the hottest team in the NHL in St. Louis, and then go through Dallas if they want to advance. Dallas has to go through Colorado and then the President's Trophy winner. And then you look at what they're about to play, be it Vegas or Edmonton. Those series just didn't seem as tough. Would you like to see, based on that scenario, if you were the commissioner, or just bring it back to top two division winners and then records fall as they may?
Yeah. I am a purist, in that regard. I want to see, I want to see the best versus the best, and we should, save the best for last.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so it's tough because, Dallas hasn't had it easy, like especially last year.
Right.
But also I think it's also kind of, it's what champions have to do no matter what, right?
Yeah.
You regardless of who it is, you have to beat who's in front of you. And ideally it's something that Dallas can kind of, manage regardless of how difficult, the path is. So yeah, again, this series is by no means over, even if it kind of feels over. But how excited are we for a Dallas Edmonton rematch?
Oh, no, it would be amazing if it happens, just one game at a time. I just know the Jets will not go down easy. And when their game is on, they are very, very tough to beat. Specifically, if Hellebuck's at home and he's on, they're very tough to beat. But we shall see. But much rather go up there 3-1 than 2-2, obviously. David, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And don't forget, if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave us a rating and say, hey, David Castillo, that guy's awesome. Because we love those comments, because that fuels other comments and it helps with our search engine optimization. So when people are wondering, where can I get Stars information, Spits and Suds will get to the top of the Google list. So thank you all for listening during this playoff run. We'll be back with another episode soon as we make our way to Dallas, Winnipeg, game number 5, Thursday night. Until then, have a great day, everyone.